You're watching Inside Out for the Midlands, and tonight I'm in Leamington Spa because legend has it in 1918 a Warwickshire private refused to shoot an injured German soldier. Well, the soldier he unwittingly let go was Adolf Hitler. Trisha Doodoo went in search of the truth about the private who could have killed Hitler.
Royal Leamington Spa has a fascinating history, and as a local radio presenter, I thought I knew most of it.
But there's one name I haven't heard before, Henry Tandy, and there are traces of him all over town.
He's listed among the freemen of the borough in the town hall.
He's even got a blue plaque dedicated to him. It says he was the most decorated private soldier of World War I.
But if you dig a little deeper, it seems that he actually hit the headlines for having Adolf Hitler in his sights, then not pulling the trigger.
They say Henry Tandy could have prevented the Second World War, and after the Coventry Blitz, Henry was racked with guilt for letting Hitler go. But is it really true? I'm here to find out.
Leamington Town Hall seems like a good place to start. Robin Taylor's from the town's Blue Plaque Committee, and he knows the tale well.
Hitler remembered being wounded on the Western Front and remembered a British soldier pointing his gun at him and then deliberately not firing, in other words, refusing to kill him. Much later on, when Hitler was in power, he saw a photograph of a picture which shows a British soldier carrying a wounded British soldier. And when Hitler saw this, he recognised the soldier doing the carrying as the man who had refused to kill him.
Do you think it's true?
The whole story I find plausible, not proved, and I would give it 6-4 on as being true.
So there could be some truth in it. The man carrying the wounded soldier is none other than Private Henry Tandy. The painting is of his regiment, the Green Howards, marching out of the Menin Crossroads near Ypres. And the original is currently on show at Kipling Hall in Yorkshire. So how did Hitler come to see it?
Hitler certainly received a copy and a photograph of this painting. We have a letter from Hitler's adjutant, Captain Wiedmann, thanking us for the large photograph.
Henry's regiment sent Hitler a copy of the picture as a gesture of goodwill, because he also served in the battle it shows. Some years later, in 1938, he met British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain in Munich.
Hitler was very proud of the fact that he'd actually seen military service and showed the photograph to Chamberlain and pointed out Tandy in it. So he obviously knew about Tandy. And Chamberlain, so the story goes, when he came back after waving his white note saying peace in our time, apparently rang up Tandy near Coventry and could not get through to Tandy because Tandy was out, but spoke to a member of the family to say that it was the Prime Minister speaking and that he'd seen the photograph of Tandy when he was with Hitler.
Hitler had asked Chamberlain to pass on his thanks to Henry, and if the story is to be believed, the Prime Minister did just that. From that point on, he was forever labelled the man who could have shot Hitler, but not everyone believes it.
It's an incredible story, David, if it's true. But you don't think it's true, do you, this story with Henry Tandy?
No, I don't think it's true, no.
Warwickshire historian David Johnson is the author of a book about Henry's life, and he thinks all the evidence points to the story not being true.
In 1997, Lieutenant Colonel Mackintosh, who was the regimental secretary of the Green Howards, tried to get to the bottom of this story. And he contacted the Bavarian State Archives, and they confirmed that in fact Hitler was on leave from the 25th to the 27th of September. The event when his life was spared was supposed to have happened on the 28th. But also, it turned out that on the 17th of September he'd been transferred to another part of the line anyway, so he would have been 50 miles away.
It's pretty hard to have anyone in your sights from 50 miles away, let alone Hitler. But what about the phone call from Chamberlain?
There were two things about that troubled me. One, that Chamberlain would have been very busy in 1938, so I went to the University of Birmingham and went through the Chamberlain papers, and found nothing about this at all.
So no record of the phone call that Neville Chamberlain would have made to Henry Tandy.
That's right. And also, I was troubled by, would Henry Tandy have had a telephone in his house? And so through the BT archives, I was able to establish that they didn't have a telephone. So he couldn't have received a telephone call. You have to say, in the heat of that battle, at the end of the day, on the 28th of September, Henry had been wounded twice. He was losing a lot of blood. He would have been covered in all sorts of dirt and so on associated with the battle, as would Hitler. So the chances of Hitler recognising him from a painting was extremely unlikely.
True or not, it's a fantastic story and one that people are happy to continue debating.
The incidents that were remembered by both people were incidents that people would remember. And also that Tandy never boasted about what he'd done, the mercy he'd shown. He didn't say that Hitler was the man in his gun sights. He said that he remembered the incident, but not the face of the human being.
It's very difficult to say. Could be Tandy seeing a photograph, the well-known photograph of Hitler in his German uniform, which is so well known, rather felt there was someone rather similar to who he fired at. So it's a very difficult question to answer.
Henry Tandy left the army in 1926 and returned to civilian life. He moved to Coventry, where he worked for the Standard Motor Company. But he never shook off the story that he'd let Adolf Hitler go.
I think that he still suffers a little bit from his sort of legacy, suffers a little bit from this story, because it's very interesting to me, for example, that if you go around the National Army Museum in London or the Imperial War Museum, you'll see nothing in the collections about Henry Tandy at all, and yet he's the most decorated private soldier to have survived the First World War. So you have to ask, well, why is that? And I think there's some snobbery and some, perhaps, still this Hitler story is casting a long shadow.
Henry Tandy died at his home in Coventry on the 20th of December 1977, aged 86. His ashes were taken to France by his nephew and great-nephew and are buried at the Masnier British Cemetery near Marconi.
I so wanted to believe that this incredible story was indeed true, but all the evidence suggests that it's just an urban myth. But whatever you believe, I hope Henry Tandy is remembered as the great man and soldier that he indeed was.
He was a remarkably gallant man. He won the military medal for going out into no man's land and bringing 3 men back at separate occasions under fire. He won the Distinguished Conduct Medal for attacking a German machine gun by himself and capturing 20 Germans. And his Victoria Cross was a series of very gallant occasions.
I think Henry needs to be remembered as this extremely brave man who had already, by the time that he won his medals, been mentioned in dispatches 5 times, he'd been wounded twice. He's a man that we should all feel proud of, and if you're looking for a hero, you couldn't do any better.
Well, it just goes to show that sometimes you need to question stories that are presented as fact. But maybe you've got a story I should know about. If so, drop me an email, mary.rhodes@bbc.co.uk, and I will get back to you.